Hello, security pros. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's ESA webinar, Installing Touchless Door Access Control with Body Temp and Mask Detection Systems. The world is going touchless. Are you familiar with today's biometric and Bluetooth access control technologies? Now, customers also want to screen for elevated body temperature and often face mask compliance. These systems are surprisingly affordable and simple to install if you do your homework. They can also integrate with customers' existing security systems. Today, we'll review how this new touchless technology works, and we'll share best practices. I'm Julian Bateman, ESA's Chief Development Officer, and I'll be facilitating our discussion today. Before we dive in with experts from ZKTeco, I do have some tips for those of you joining us on your very first ESA webinar. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. At any point throughout the presentation, click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your control panel to pose a question with our expert today. There's no need to save those questions or comments until the end of today's session. If something pops up, go ahead and type it in, and we'll ensure we save some time for those questions. We'll also be recording today's webinar, so you can watch the on-demand video at your leisure and share it with your colleagues. Give us until tomorrow to get the video exported and hosted on the ESA website. There's no need to go searching for it. We'll send you an email with a link to the video tomorrow. We at ESA realize your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time with us today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our expert, Larry Reed. Larry Reed is a 15-year veteran in the biometrics industry. He's currently CEO of ZKTeco USA, where he presides over several business units, including door access control, entrance control, time and attendance, and biometrics AI. Reed has specific application expertise in the fields of physical access control and time and attendance, and has helped well over 100 enterprise and SMB companies integrate a variety of biometric devices with their respective application software. Larry, we are so pleased to welcome you and the ZKTeco team to the ESA webinar stage. Let's dive in.
Well, Jillian, thank you so much for that introduction. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you great.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you all for joining us today. And as Jillian had pointed out, I'd like to make this a very interactive time spent together. So please, as you have questions, please do raise them. There's no, don't be shy. We'll take several pauses. We have a lot of content to cover. I'd also like to remind everyone this session will be recorded if any of you do have to drop off. And certainly, we're available offline to answer any other particular questions or have any projects that you might have. So as mentioned before, the title of this presentation is The New Normal. I'm almost getting tired of hearing that expression, but you can't argue it. This has become the new normal. More and more people working from home, more and more businesses are challenged with how to bring back customers into their various establishments. Even the schools are struggling to stay open and having the government support their efforts and so on. So we will discuss this new normal that's currently we're challenged with. And we're going to be talking specifically about the installation of touchless door access control systems. Certainly touchless is now one of the most important technologies to be considering, to be mindful of. If any of you are doing Google Analytics, customers are all looking for touchless solutions. In addition to that, since COVID-19, people are very mindful of limiting their exposure to anyone possibly who's sick or infectious, whether it's COVID-19 or any other potential infectious diseases. So we're seeing more and more body temperature detection devices. In addition to that, also mask compliance is also necessary in this new world we live in. And of course, no one will argue healthcare facilities usually have masks and certainly food processing plants, but now it seems you can't even walk into a retail store unless you remember to put your mask on. So it's very important to understand that this is prevalent in our society, and as security professionals, how do we help our clients and how do we make the use of available technology? So that's really what this discussion will focus upon. So with that, allow me to kick this off. high-level agenda of the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to look at what were customers' priorities prior to COVID-19, and of course, now what is the new norm now that COVID-19 is among us? We're going to answer the question, why are thermal recognition and body temperature detectors being implemented today? If you haven't seen that, perhaps you still might be spending a lot of time at home, but even if you go shopping, doctor's offices, working out at the gym, before you're allowed entrance, typically there's a person or a device measuring your skin temperature to ensure that you're not going to pose a risk to the patrons inside. There are a few ways to implement body temperature detection through the use of surveillance cameras or access control devices. So we're going to contrast those two. And then we're also going to look at current and emerging products that are integrated with body temperature detection. Most all the devices you may see online typically are very limited in their capability. Perhaps they trigger an LED or sound off an alarm if elevated body temperature is detected. But it's really important to have some idea, what are you going to do with that device once there is a vaccine for COVID-19? Does it have any additional value after there's a vaccine for COVID-19? So it's real important to understand, what can you do with these devices that preserve your client's investment in them? And we're going to touch upon other applications, including access control. Now you can actually keep a door locked if a person fails either their body temperature or mask compliance. So also visitor management. You don't want to have people coming to the visitors desk. Before, it used to be just a matter of proving if the person actually is who they say they are when visiting a building and attempting entry. But now it's also a matter of, is that visitor compliant, wearing a mask, and have they passed mask detection? Body temperature detection. Assuming that you have body temperature detection opportunities for clients, it's also important to know, what are the best practices in installing these devices. These devices often do not work right out of the box. It does require a level of training and understanding how to enroll people, where to install the device, and how to ensure success when you do install these devices. They're not cheap. So very important to understand best practices. Why go touchless? Well, to appreciate why customers want touchless technology, we're going to take a quick 5-minute review of the evolution of access control, going back to caveman times. I promise you we won't spend covering the whole 100,000 years, but it is important to understand, the only way to know where your future lies is to understand your past, right? We often hear that advice. Well, the same thing in security. Every single security advancement was predicated on approving the previous condition. So we're going to do a little bit of access control 101. Then we're going to talk about introduction of Bluetooth technology. Most of us with kids, the only time you ever know about Bluetooth is because your kids want to connect their speakers with their headsets. Well, Bluetooth is now becoming more prevalent as a business application, the ability now to control doors from your phone as opposed to using traditional card access systems. We're then going to touch upon biometric verification, how that works, and biometric verification as it pertains to access control software, panels, readers, locks, and so on. So I'll apologize ahead of time. We're going to go through this material very quickly because it's a lot. I believe you'll all find it relevant. And hopefully if we have time at the end, we'll answer questions. But if not, we can certainly review some of this material offline, have one-on-one webinars if you like, and we're certainly available to answer questions. So with that, let's kick this off. Prior to COVID-19, security professionals, most all of us were focused on fire suppression systems, access control systems, intrusion, and surveillance. These are the things that we normally were focused upon. These are the things our clients were most concerned with addressing to ensure they could provide a safe and secure environment for their customers and employees. But today that's all changed. Now it's not a matter of how do I secure my premise. It's a matter of how do I reopen my business. So fire suppression, access control, of course, these are still very important to safety, but really what's the point if you can't reopen? And the key to reopening a business and the key to reopening up the school is reinstalling confidence. The government needs to have confidence that if they allow you to reopen, there's not going to be an additional wave of COVID-19. Your employees certainly will not feel comfortable returning to work unless they're confident that they're not going to be exposed to someone with COVID-19. And of course, your customers who pay the bills, they're not going to return to the shops, or students and parents are not going to feel comfortable returning to school unless they have some level of confidence they're not going to be exposed to COVID-19. So this is the single most important question you need to answer, is how do you help your clients reinstill confidence? It surpasses all other security technologies. And the answer to that, how to reinstill confidence that people are not going to become ill or exposed, is by measuring body temperature. Now, to many of us in the US, this is something that's new, but certainly in overseas countries, especially in Asia and Africa, that have been dealing with pandemics such as Ebola virus, bird flu, SARS, they've been going through this for several decades. And if you do travel abroad, you'll notice that all these entry points will have people with handheld skin temperature thermometers. And they will approach you. If this has never happened to you before, it scared the heck out of me. It looks like someone approaching you with a knife in their hand, ready to stab you. But measuring body temperature is probably the most common way to at least quarantine anyone who's potentially sick. Now, when you measure someone's skin temperature, it's not definitely that they have a fever. It's not definitely they've got COVID-19. It's basically a likely symptom of them being sick. Measuring body temperature is like police officers pulling you over at the middle of the night and giving you a sobriety test, because you're either out late at night, so it's likely you're drinking, or if your car is swerving, it's likely you may have been drinking excessively. So that officer, as an initial screening, may ask you to walk a straight line, or maybe recite something. So measuring body temperature, sobriety tests, these are initial screenings to try to find out if someone is actually drunk and over the limit, or if someone actually does have a virus and is infectious. These are initial screening techniques. Body temperature or thermal imaging scanning, again, is not a new technology. In fact, it's quite prevalent at military borders, in oil production, forest fire prevention. Anytime where you need to find thermal leakage is usually a potential problem. Also for energy savings. So measuring temperature is nothing new. It's used in many, many different industries. It's only new in the security world, where we're actually scanning people before they re-enter the premise. There are basically two ways to approach thermal detection, either through a surveillance camera. And when you use a surveillance camera, the idea is you want to capture as many people potentially having elevated body temperature. So this is for the masses. We want to do a mass screening as quickly as possible. It usually consists of a thermal camera. And because those thermal cameras are often installed 10 feet or more away from the people that they're scanning, they often need a black body. A black body allows that thermal camera to calibrate against the room temperature. And then the thermal camera is also streaming video to a video recorder. And then typically you've got somebody physically, manually looking at that video to see if they notice anyone with elevated body temperature, so that they can then remove them from that area, and then perhaps question them, ask them where they've been, or sometimes just let them sit down for a minute, and then all of a sudden their skin temperature returns back to normal, because it's always possible that it was extremely hot outside, extremely cold outside, or maybe the person had just completed exercise. So sometimes it's just a matter of letting that person rest for one moment. As mentioned before, these cameras are often mounted upwards to 20 feet away from the people they're scanning. So that's why you'll often see a black body to calibrate the room temperature, so that the camera can get a much more accurate feed on that person. So this is just an image of a surveillance camera with thermal imaging with a black body. Now, all depending upon your application, in my experience, and we've sold over 6,000 of these body temperature scanners since the month of May. In almost all cases, the people were really interested in scanning people one-on-one. And if that person had an elevated temperature, they wanted to prevent that one person from getting through that gate or that turnstile. So access control readers with thermal scanners inside, in my personal experience, have been the most prevalent way to screen people. And with that one device, it eliminates the need for a thermal camera, black body. There's no video to stream or record. In fact, you can also automate the process, so you don't need anyone, manually standing there with a thermometer in their hands. Instead, the device will check that person's temperature and then unlock that door, gate, or turnstile, assuming that person has elevated body temperature. So with that, Jillian, I'd like to take a pause for a moment. Does anyone have any questions or any topics they'd like me to touch upon at this point?
As a reminder, you can go in and click that Q&A icon at the bottom of your control panel to pose a question to our expert. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, simply comment and we'll pose those questions to Larry as well.
Wonderful. So just to recap, we just wanted to emphasize that, of course, we are among this COVID-19 era, and body temperature detection seems to be one of the hottest, literally and figuratively, topics. And the best way to engage any of your clients is by simply asking them, are you challenged with reopening your business? And have you thought about body temperature measurement devices? And how can you help them? That will be the start of every other conversation to every other product and service that you offer.
Larry, we do have one question before you move
Sure.
on. Are there standard regulations for monitoring this?
Well, currently right now, there's really no standards. I will say that the CDC has noted that typically anyone with a body temperature of 100.4 degrees or higher is considered febrile or feverish and at risk of getting other people sick around them. So that's one standard. Another standard which does not exist currently is the Food and Drug Administration is now beginning to look at these devices because there are some vendors who are marketing these devices as COVID-19 detectors, as fever detectors. And so the FDA is very concerned that some of these vendors are making false claims. So you want to make sure that whichever vendor's technology you're working with, I hope you look at ZKTeco, you want to make sure that the claims are realistic and they're not outrageous. In our case, our only claim is that we're measuring skin temperature at any moment in time. Now, it is possible that skin temperature may be giving you false reads because you just came out of a very, very hot summer day, or maybe you're coming in from a very cold winter night with a sharp breeze. Well, your skin temperature may not be reflective of your health in that moment. So that's why it's very important to understand the technology you're going to implement, the vendor you're working with, and how the products are installed, and how your employees are trained to interact with people you're measuring. But there are no specific third-party standards other than that. Okay, so with that, allow me to continue. Now, here's a snapshot of when you can combine, or video, when you can combine all these technologies together. So the point behind this video is just to provoke thought and help you consider all the different products and services that you can offer because of COVID-19 and the need for measuring body temperature.
The process of entering a secure facility can consume your time and overlook health guidelines, putting your people at risk. ZKTeco is here to help. Introducing our portfolio of advanced safety and security solutions that will verify identity, ensure acceptable skin temperature, confirm mask usage, and detect concealed metal objects, making the check-in process 100% automated and touchless. Prior to visitors arriving for their appointment, their host will send an invitation to their phone which contains a unique QR code. When the visitor arrives, they display the QR code to the kiosk FK1013+. The kiosk then scans the visitor's skin temperature to ensure it's within acceptable range. The kiosk will also check to ensure the visitor is wearing a protective face mask. After the kiosk confirms the visitor's identity, acceptable skin temperature, and that they're wearing a mask, the visitor's ticket will print. Simultaneously, the kiosk notifies the host that the visitor has arrived and is permitted to enter the facility. Then, visitors approach the SBTL 8000 turnstile. The Speed Face Plus device will verify their identity with face recognition technology, eliminating the need for an ID card. The device will also conduct a skin temperature check to confirm it's in acceptable range. Once identity and acceptable skin temperature are confirmed, the turnstile will release, allowing the visitor to proceed to the WMD 318 Plus metal detector. Visitors then position their forehead or wrist within 6 inches of the skin temperature scanner. Thermal scanning takes less than 2 seconds. If no elevated temperature is detected, the visitor can proceed through the metal detector. If a metal object is detected, the nearest LED light to the object will illuminate, and an alarm will sound. If no metal object is detected, visitors are then allowed to enter the facility with their host. ZKTeco's products provide safety, security, and auditing while delivering greater peace of mind for facility managers, employees, and visitors. ZKTeco, your security, our responsibility.
So thank you everyone for bearing through that very commercialized video. and I apologize. Gillian at ESA, of course, this is not about commercializing vendors. This is about providing information. And really, that point of that video was for you to consider all the various different access points and the way to automate the system and making it all touchless and safe. And many of that technology is all available from ZKTeco USA. However, you may have a preference for your own kiosk provider, your own turnstile provider, your own metal detector provider, regardless of whichever vendor you prefer working with. I wanted to make you all mindful that all this technology, it can all be brought together and allow your customers' businesses now to reopen and having the assurance and the confidence that skin temperature is being checked, or metal detection if you have any municipal customers where they're often scanning for metal objects. Doesn't have to be an airport. So all these things come together, and if you're mindful of them, you'll find out that your clients have a need for at least some or all of this technology. And with ZKTeco, all of it's available to you, or you may just want to use one or two of our products integrated with your customer's existing environment. So very typical on the internet now is this 8-inch tablet. Now with ZK, we call it our SpeedFace 1008 Plus. There are many similar looking tablets on the market, and from a product perspective, they all pretty much operate the same. You can argue whose biometrics are better, you can argue whose thermal sensing is better, but you should all be mindful that pretty much the product itself is all comparable. So allow me to go through these features. Again, this is not unique to ZK. This is pretty much comparable to all the other products. I will say, of course, we are the original manufacturer. There's only a handful of these device manufacturers. We're one of them, and that's why we have a patent pending in the US. These devices, most all of them have biometric recognition, at the very least face recognition. Some of our devices also additionally have palm recognition, so you can have totally touchless, as well as fingerprint. But because they're identifying people, it's a great front end to an access control system. It's a great front end to a time and attendance system. Any applications that require user authentication, this device is ideal for. So if you are going to the market and you are looking for a body temperature solution for your clients, it's important that that device has long-lasting value. So you should ask the vendor, what else can I do with this device besides lighting up an LED or triggering off an alarm? Now, most all the devices come with what's called a Thermopile sensor. However, you'll notice in the next device, we also have a thermal imaging camera, which provides much greater accuracy. But these Thermopile sensors work phenomenally well as long as they're installed in a climate-controlled room. And we'll talk about best practices. As long as the temperature is not varying, and as long as there's no cross breeze, the less expensive Thermopile sensor works fantastic. Our device, the SpeedFace 8-inch, it supports up to 50,000 faces and 5,000 palms. The reason why we've introduced palm recognition is because we also have mask detection. And granted, if the mask is going to be covering most of your face, the accuracy may no longer be 100%. So if you find that the accuracy is becoming less with wearing a face mask, certainly you could use the palm as an alternative or for two-factor authentication. The temperature detection is extremely accurate, 0.6 degree Fahrenheit deviation at most. That's because normally your face is within 18 inches of the device. And you'll achieve that accuracy consistently as long as this device is installed in a climate-controlled room. As mentioned before, it also has mask detection. Mask compliance is becoming very, very prevalent across all industries. What's also nice about this device, it has a dual lens camera design. It has an infrared light. Infrared is what gets you the accuracy. And it also allows the device to be used in total darkness. So you can really use this device 24 hours a day. And it also has a visible light camera lens, and it works under very bright sunlight conditions. As far as communications are concerned, and this is really, really key, you want a device that has network communication, TCP/IP, at the very least, or even Wi-Fi. And that's because you want to be able to not only detect, but also record, and better yet, notify system administrators if someone is in violation of the mask compliance, if they do have an elevated body temperature. You're also going to want to have that for auditing purposes, for liability purposes. So whatever device you're using, network connectivity is extremely important. You can also use this device in combination with an existing card access system. Many of our customers we're finding already had an existing card access system in place. However, they wanted to add the additional safety layer of being able to detect elevated body temperature or mask violation. So they will install these devices right next to the card access system. And when you authenticate with your card, even if you're an authorized user, if you fail the body temperature scan, if you fail the mask detection scan, the device can override that card reader, denying that person access. So this is a terrific complement to your customers that have existing access control systems. We also have Wiegand output, so this can connect to the customer's existing access control panel. So this is where I say it's very important to understand what is the long-term value or utility value of these devices, assuming that there's a near-term vaccine for COVID-19. How do you protect your customers' investment in the technology? And why do some of these devices are more expensive than others? That's when you really need to do your homework and understand what are the overall capabilities of this device. Lastly, these devices have door locks, alarms, exit buttons, and that's why they can light up LEDs. That's why they can trigger an alarm, and that's why they can also connect to a door lock, trigger a camera. So you want to make sure the device also has a full complement of auxiliary input and output. Now, I mentioned before, through the use of a thermal sensor, it's imperative that the customer has a climate-controlled room. You typically don't want that device too close to an exterior door. We had one client very upset. We only later found out the reason why the accuracy was not that great was because they installed the device right after the revolving door to their street or their street level store. So if you are going to be in, your client has environments where the temperature cannot be controlled, that's when you want to purchase a slightly more expensive version of this that has a thermographic camera. In our case, instead of calling this SF1008 Plus, we call it an 8T Plus. The T stands for thermographic camera. And these devices are far more accurate. As I mentioned, they're about 25% more expensive. But if your client does not have a climate-controlled room, if there's breezes and so on, you want to go with this particular model with the thermographic camera. So here we put a little chart together that compares the difference between a thermal imaging camera versus a Thermopile sensor. You'll notice with a thermal imaging camera, it automatically calibrates itself. Whereas the Thermopile sensor, at least 4 times a year as the seasons change, you may want to recalibrate that device, or if you're having very varying degrees, temperature changes in the room, you may want to need to calibrate more often. The read distance on the thermal imaging camera is a little bit further with the thermal imaging camera at 2.5 feet versus 18 inches with the Thermopile sensor. One question people often will ask because they're familiar with surveillance cameras, where does the black body fit in here? Well, I kind of laugh. There's no room for a black body because your face is less than 2 feet from the device. So no, you do not need a black body. With these devices, you don't need anything else other than possibly software if you want to be able to do centralized management and if you want to do reporting, detection, notification, and so on. The thermal imaging camera version has 10 times more measuring points, 10,800 compared to 1,000. And as mentioned before, the thermal imaging camera does not need to be calibrated. It's far more adaptable. So you're looking at these body temperature detection devices. The first thing you want to ask that vendor, is this a Thermopile sensor or a thermal imaging camera? And now you understand the difference between those two. I'll take a pause for a moment. Jillian, if you want to ask anyone if they had any experience with these body temperature detection devices or questions or concerns or experience they want to share?
Absolutely. Feel free to type in the comments there if you have some experience you want to share with the group. I do have a few questions to pitch to you, Larry.
Sure.
I have QuickBooks Server and I need to connect the SF1008 Plus to it so that I can clock in and clock out. Is this integration possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Bear in mind, all these devices, whether or not they measure body temperature, they're all sort of time and attendance clocks, if you think about it, because they're measuring, rather they're recognizing the user, they're noting the date and the time, they're noting the which device they clocked in at, and so on. And at the very least, we can export an Excel spreadsheet that has that information. Then whatever time and attendance or payroll software application you have, you could import that Excel spreadsheet or CSV file, whatever format it's in. So that's absolutely available to you on a manual basis. And then for some of our customers, we actually will write a direct integration so the device works directly with whichever payroll software package or accounting package or time and attendance package, whatever application that may be, ZK can write the integration, as well as the application provider can also write the integration to our device. So integration is absolutely available to you. It just requires either ourselves, the hardware manufacturer, or the software application partner to utilize the available development kits and then create that integration for you. So happy to speak with you offline further about that.
Evgen, I know you did have a follow-up question about pricing, and we will absolutely connect you with Larry after this webinar to get all of those questions answered for you. We have one more question. Do these trigger a relay to tie to our access system?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what's most important, again, is what can the device do besides ring a bell or light up a light? And then the previous slide, they all had multiple auxiliary inputs, outputs. So at the very least, you can trigger a bell, or you can also connect that 12-volt relay to a door lock, which could release a door or a gate or a turnstile or an elevator. Really, these devices, you shouldn't consider them access control devices. They're really just switches. So if that device recognizes it's Larry or Jillian, if it recognizes that we're touching it at an appropriate time during the day, at that point, we can open up a light, trigger an elevator, open up a data center cage. Really, it's just a 12-volt switch that you can connect to anything.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, so allow me to proceed. There's still a lot of content. Again, I'll try to have some time at the end for questions and answers. I mentioned before, the thing that really separates most all the vendors or suppliers of this technology is, do they have software? Because it's one thing to trigger a bell or to light up an LED when it senses someone's elevated body temperature, but then what? Most cases, you want a record of that information. You want to know which employees came to work with elevated body temperature and not wearing their mask. You also want to know what visitors have arrived. And if anyone has arrived, you want to be able to have some type of alert notification in real time so that you can quickly quarantine that person before they proceed further and risk possibly exposing themselves. So in the case of ZK, we have our ZK biosecurity management software that has a body temperature module. And in this case, you can see a sample of what that looks like. Here's our temperature monitoring. And on the screen, you can see that we're taking photographs of people while the device recognizes them. At the same time, we're capturing the date, the time, if there's a department within the building where they normally report to, and of course, what their body temperature was in that moment of time. So this is where the real-time monitoring is occurring. And you, of course, you can set triggers so that if anyone is detected having elevated body temperature, there's a corresponding notification. The next slide shows the raw data. It shows everything. It shows who the person was, the date, the time, the device that actually detected the temperature. It'll have their department, as mentioned before. It'll have their body temperature. It'll also have what their normal body temperature is if they're registered users. And it will also capture the image of their face as an option. I like to remind everyone, all these devices, they're doing biometric recognition. They're not doing face matching. The only reason the device may optionally store a face image is simply for visual feedback. If you want the user to see that their face was recognized, or if perhaps you have a security guard on their screen, they want to have someone's face pop up whenever they authenticate, it's strictly for audio, for manual visual feedback. But these devices do not need to store face images because they do not match face images. So that's clearly up to the person who's installing the device. So in that 2-minute video that I shared with you, it gave a good example of some of the other places where you might want to implement body temperature detection, mask detection, access control. Here's a device we have. It's called the Face Kiosk 1013 Plus. In the ZKTeco product line, any product that has a plus at the end means that it has the option for having body temperature detection. So for any of your clients who have manual visitor management systems, and this it's still quite common, even though I don't understand. If you ever see a logbook at any particular office, you can pretty much write anyone's name, and it's very unlikely anyone's going to stop requesting you. And with that logbook, how do you access it in the future? How do you prevent the pages from not being ripped? How do you ensure that your guard at the desk is correctly processing that visitor? So visitor management is something that's equally important as access control. With access control, you're monitoring if your employees have access, but what do you do with all those visitors? Do you let them roam the hallways by themselves? Do you trust your security guards? So we're seeing visitor management as an exploding market. And even better, when you have that visitor identify themselves, take their body temperature, ensure they're wearing a mask, and then record that accordingly in the visitor management system. As mentioned in the video, we can even have an unmanned version of this, when that kiosk will actually generate a QR code after it recognizes the person, validates their appointment, checks for their body temperature and mask compliance. That printout has a QR code that can be used to release a door, turnstile, or a gate, allowing that person entry into that meeting location. So this is just an example of where else you can have body temperature detection. I encourage you all to ask your customers, what are they doing about visitors? How are they managing visitors, processing visitors, ensuring the visitors are not imposters, and ensuring the visitors have acceptable body temperature? So as an example of a kiosk. Mentioned before in the video, you can also connect the devices to a turnstile. Jillian just fielded a question, can this be connected to an access control device? Absolutely, and this is how you provide unmanned access control. A lot of customers are now, they're paying people to monitor body temperature, they're paying people to secure a door, they're paying people to make sure that visitors fill out the health check questionnaire. Well, hiring all those people is an expense, and especially during COVID-19, when revenues are down because visitation has lessened, you want to automate this all as much as possible. So we recommend take these body temperature detection devices and connect them with your access control devices. So here we have an example of a turnstile, but there's really nothing much more unique about our turnstile than third-party turnstiles. Or if there's an existing third-party turnstile that's already installed at your client location, consider connecting the body temperature reader to that turnstile and then automating the access control. Also in the video, walk-through metal detectors are becoming more common in places, especially with schools. Sadly, last year, the headline wasn't COVID-19. The headline was which school got shot up or which place of worship got shot up. So metal detectors became very much in demand. Well, it's very simple to add a thermal scanner to a walk-through metal detector. Now, besides checking for concealed metal objects, why not check for their body temperature? You know, a lot of customers, a lot of partners, you know, everyone has a question in their mind, how long will this last? Will the need to check body temperature, long remain after there's a vaccine for COVID-19? I believe it will, because this technology is so affordable, and to spend an extra 2 or 3 seconds to scan somebody for temperature while they're authenticating to the door, that extra 2 or 3 seconds is not going to add up. I really believe that long-term, this is going to be very common before entering a facility. Not only do you have to show your ID, but now you actually have to pass body temperature scans, maybe not masks, but certainly body temperature. And again, you're only adding 2 or 3 seconds to the process. So here we have some best practices. I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm not sure who actually is using this technology. But as I mentioned before, when you're installing this technology, it's very important to not install it too close to an exterior window or door where you have a breeze, because as you can imagine, your exterior skin temperature does change based on the environment that you're walking within. And if you are going to have to install these devices close to a door, allow people when they walk in at least a few seconds to normalize their temperature with the room. But it's always best to install these in climate-controlled rooms. You also want to make sure that they're not installed too closely to windows having direct sunlight, because the sunlight actually will almost create a greenhouse effect, so to speak, as you can imagine when you're inside your car. You also want to install these devices typically about 5.5 feet above the ground, because that's the average height of most Americans, male and female. So you want to put it at a height where it's comfortable for the users. It's interesting. One of the professional sports franchises, I won't say which one, but they typically have very tall athletes that are over 7 feet tall. They actually have 2 devices per entry because the franchise staff are typically around 5.5 feet, but the players are at 7.5. So they actually have 2 devices. You also don't want to put these devices too close together because they can create feedback amongst each other. So if you have multiple access points, you want to install these 3 feet apart. There are other operational tips, comments we've associated with each one. I put these here only because people have called in with questions. Typically, it's a very straightforward implementation, but if customers have no prior experience with biometrics, if they have no prior experience with thermal detection, it's a good idea just to run these through the basics. But they're actually all common sense. You don't want to have your face covered with your hair. You don't want to have perspiration running across your forehead because that will lower your skin temperature. Most all these are very common sense, but we have people who don't always use common sense. So these best practices are available to you. Okay, so with that, Jillian, I thought I would pause for a moment. If there is anyone on the line that has had prior experience with these body temperature detection devices, do they have any questions about best practices?
You can type those questions in either the chat or the Q&A interface, or you can comment us on Facebook.
So, yep. So again, these are all very important. It should not be overwhelming. Most all of them are common sense. But again, sometimes there is an expectation that things work out of the box, especially in this, this world we live in, where you jump on Amazon, you can have a product shipped at your doorstep within a few hours. So it's very important to understand how this technology works. When it does, it works fantastic. And if it doesn't work, unfortunately, the installer looks bad. The vendor looks bad. Their CEO, like me, looks bad. And actually, the person who made the purchasing decision looks bad. So it's very important with this technology. You should get trained on it to ensure a very positive experience.
Larry, before you move on, you did mention some of those different height
Yes.
requirements. Is there an articulating mount that can be adjusted by users of different heights?
Yeah, Joy, that's a great question. And we actually now include several different mounting options. Originally, we thought these devices would be strictly wall mounted, but no, they're actually floor mounted. So from the wall, we have an articulating mount that's available from ZKTeco. And we also have a certain a variety of poles and display stands that also can be put on the floor. So there are many, many options available to you. But great question. You absolutely have an articulating arm.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's just a quick video on the convenience that Touchless provides. So that video basically shows that touchless is not just for hygiene purposes, but also for convenience and throughput. And certainly from a business proprietor's perspective, you don't want to have customers, getting backed up. They didn't have their key, they didn't have their card, and so on. So face recognition, palm recognition, all this technology really improves the user experience, and it just saves money, quickens throughput, and so on. So continuing on, we have another 10 minutes or so. I just want to quickly touch upon how did we get to the need for touchless technology and biometrics. So this is a very, very quick race through time and access control. And I tease, going back 100,000 years ago, the first access control was moving a rock in front of a cave. That was the only thing available to cavemen. What were the pros? Well, rocks are very cheap. They're secure. Of course, they're durable, but the cons are, of course, that smaller men or women can't really move the rock. So clearly, this is not going to be a long-lasting solution. Things needed to improve. So fast forward 100,000 years, metal keys, metal locks, this is still the most prevalent way that homes are secured, businesses are secured, schools are secured. White keys, well, of course, keys are cheap, very lightweight, and they're easy to copy. The con, of course, is the fact they are easy to copy. So when you go away to work during the day and your kids go to school, you don't know who's making copies of the keys. You don't know who the employees have made copies for, and so on. It's also hard to manage many, many keys. In fact, nowadays there's also key management software. There are key lockers to help keep inventory. So keys are a challenge and hard to keep track of. The next evolution were push pin locks. The pro here is that now you can eliminate the keys. These are very self-installable, relatively inexpensive. But of course, with the con is that the PIN code can be forgotten, and also a bad guy could be looking over your shoulder and copy and notice what the PIN code is. So it's really not secure, and there is no audit trail. These are not electronic devices. So the next evolution, of course, became cards. Cards with barcodes, with mag stripes, still very prevalent in retail applications, point of sales applications, and of course RFID also. The pros are now you have an electronic audit trail. They're still very, very inexpensive, and it's still fairly hard to copy cards, even though now they're actually for $10, you can actually get an RFID card cloner. The con is, and no matter how, I don't want to bad name any vendors who brag about their encryption on their cards. They're harder to hack, true, but still cards can be lost, stolen, forgotten. They're also a consumable, which is why the card vendors love customers sticking with cards, because you need to replace the cards every time the antenna breaks or someone loses them and so on. And as mentioned before, cards can now be cloned, at least the traditional 125 kilohertz. So that's why people are moving into smart card technology. So have the card replace the PIN code. Now moving up to touchless, having touchless technology, typically Bluetooth, frees you from the card. Now you no longer have the card as a consumable. Now you don't have to worry about people sharing their cards because the credential is now on your phone. So the nice part about these Bluetooth readers and the Bluetooth digital credential is it's very unlikely it's going to be shared or anyone because it's on your phone. Your phone now becomes their credential. And you purchase the digital credential, no different than you would purchase plastic RFID cards. So now it's very important to work with vendors that have Bluetooth capability. And of course, with ZK, we have our Atlas Door Kit. It supports Bluetooth readers. And they work just like any other Wiegand reader, except instead of using a card, you're using your phone as your credential. And then you don't have to worry because typically people do not lend their phone out. People do not forget their phone. They don't lose their phone. Granted, sometimes it happens. It's very expensive. But you ask any employee, they're more concerned with where their phone is than where their access key is. And with ZKTeco, we have 1, 2, and 4 door Atlas door kits. They're very simple to utilize. There's no software downloaded, nor is there a recurring fee for it. Basically, the application is on the control panel itself. So as resellers, as installers, you can still charge your customers a monthly maintenance fee. But as far as your costs are concerned, there are no recurring costs, and there's no software to download. All you need to do is log into the panel itself, and that panel will support up to 20 other panels or 84 doors in their entirety. The Atlas kit does support what we call a CARE 500 Bluetooth reader. So again, you want to look at Bluetooth readers as an option to traditional card-based or Wiegand readers. They install no differently. They support Wiegand. So really from an installation perspective, it's really the same. In fact, you can switch out your existing card readers because the Bluetooth readers use the same wiring. So very, very simple to swap. And now your customer gets away from that recurring cost of those replacing those cards. Plus, it's less likely that they're going to forget their phone. So I'm sure that company, that client's productivity will increase because their employees will no longer have difficulty accessing the building, accessing their doors because they have their phone in hand. There's just some specs on the Bluetooth reader. Again, it operates just like any RFID Wiegand reader, except it's reading a Bluetooth signal instead of a card signal. And with our system, like with most all systems, it's all about ease of use, and we have a full feature mobile app. Whatever access control systems you prefer, make sure that Bluetooth readers are available, and make sure they also have a mobile app so that you can centrally manage it. So carrying on with the evolution, now we're into biometric evolution. And why is biometrics superior to cards or even the phone? Well, even if you have a phone, there's always a possibility you're going to lose that Bluetooth signal. There's always going to be a possibility that you can't download that credential because you've got bad reception. And you can't force all your employees to use their phone for door access. So with biometrics, it's all touchless. Granted, fingerprint used to be popular, but now starting with face recognition and palm recognition, you can now go touchless. Biometrics works very, very simple too. Some people think this is rocket science. I assure you it's not. Basically, you take an image of a person's biological characteristic, whether it's their hand or their face or their palm or their finger. Each vendor has their own algorithm that takes that image and then converts it into a biometric template, which is just a series of zeros and ones, and that's stored in the database in the reader. Now, when that person tries to authenticate, the process repeats itself. The person will place their face in front of the camera. The device will convert that to a biometric template, converts it to zeros and ones. It'll then reference that database of stored templates. And if there's a match, the door will open up. So it's very, very straightforward. There are various forms of face recognition, biometric recognition, face, fingerprint. They all work the same. They take that image, the software converts it to a template, stores it in a database. When the person returns, the system will recreate that template compared to the database. If it's a match, it works. The latest release of ZK, we now have outdoor face recognition. These are very, very powerful devices. They work terrific now on exterior doors or perhaps the gate to a homeowners association or gated community. And you'll notice these devices look very much like the other devices we showed you. The only difference is they're weatherproof, IP68 and IK04 vandal resistant. So you can use utilizing face recognition both indoors and outdoors. And there's also vein pattern recognition, works the same way, converts to a template, templates are stored on a database and stored. We have some quick tips with biometrics as far as the pros and cons of each one. Again, this is just like body temperature detection. Make sure you understand the environment in which it's being installed. If you're not sure about biometrics, I assure you it works fantastic. Customers love it, but please do speak to ZKTeco, get a demo unit, and become familiarized with the technology before installing it. So with that, Jillian, I think I left this with 2 or 3 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you, Larry. As a reminder, everyone, you can type your questions into the Q&A panel or the chat interface. Larry, is the product manufactured in the USA? Great question, Perry.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any of these body temperature detection solutions being manufactured in the US. Most all the cameras themselves are coming out of either Europe or in China. That's as far as the thermal camera. Of course, there are access control devices manufactured in the US. Most of them today, because the manufacturing is less expensive, comes out of China. With ZKTeco, we have a huge China manufacturing facility where we ship over 500,000 devices. But with changing trade relations with China and the US and government regulations, we now also have manufacturing facilities outside of China in Thailand and India. So depending upon your requirements with regards to price and compliance, we can choose whichever factory is most suitable.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I understand this question. I'll do my best, Evgen. How do you use Weekend?
Yeah, so Weekend is the basic communication protocol between all access control readers and panels. So, reader manufacturers all have Weekend output, and panel manufacturers all have Weekend input. So typically, as long as the reader has Weekend output, you can connect it to any panel. So you have RFID, traditional proximity card readers that have Weekend output. The Bluetooth readers have Weekend output. The biometric readers have Weekend output. As long as the device has Weekend output, it will work with whatever access control panel you have.
Thank you, Larry. It looks like those are all the questions that we have thus far. I want to thank ZKTeco and Larry for the very interesting presentation. A lot of really neat technology shown here that can help ESA members. I'll leave it to you to close it out, Larry.
Yeah, again, I thank you so much. And real important, these body temperature readers, the customers have very strong feelings about them, I assure you. They either heard wonderful things about them and they want to learn more, or they've heard horrible things about them because they've been misinformed. Regardless, if you ask your customers what they're doing about reopening their business, how are they attracting customers back? And when you ask that question, they'll have an opinion, and that's when you can introduce all this body temperature detection solutions, the mask compliance, the touchless technology. And all these products were designed for only security purposes. Granted, not all customers have a budget for it, or they have a concern for it. Honestly speaking, myself, I don't have biometric readers on my own home. I just, I haven't seen the need for it. So my point being is these customers are now concerned with reopening their business. When this technology helps them reopen business, trust me, they'll have a budget for it. Even turnstile manufacturers, previously would never want to speak to me. They don't care about access control technology. They just sell turnstiles. Well, the turnstile vendors now realize their turnstiles are being used to enable business because customers who have elevated body temperature cannot access that work premise. They cannot access that turnstile unless they pass the body temperature. So if you're enabling business, customers will find the budget.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you to all the ESA security pros on the webinar today. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.